This is, I guess, the inaugural Yahara Tech podcast, of which there's no official name, but I don't know. We'll see where this rolls.
Let's come up with something cool.
I think this kind of came about because Josh and I are always talking about various technology things, and we thought maybe we just record it, throw it out there. So we're always talking about biohealth, we're talking about transportation, but we're never really talking about the tech behind it and what Yahara is doing there. So I guess this is a little bit of that, a little bit of geek out. So Josh, you want to introduce you?
Yeah, I'm Josh. Oh, sorry.
And Josh, who and what do you do?
So I'm the director of engineering at Yahara Software, and I don't know, personally have a kid and spend a lot of my time thinking about changing our industry and where things are going and cool tech stuff that's coming out in the news, and honestly just oddly enough geeking out with random people in niche like sectors sometimes about like farmers and like the weird technology that goes on in their industry too. So
You do have a rather eclectic set of contacts that you bring
it's yeah, it's kind of
stories
funny.
about.
I'm like I'm known. I'm like the techie guy in my community. So it's like
Right.
people are just like, hey, so in my industry, this is a thing. Like, I got in deep with a guy like 2 weeks-ish ago or so about like pesticides and like genetically modified like feed corn in order to prevent like or like basically like bugs from attacking and eating all like the entire crop, and like is there alternate solutions to that that technology can solve, and like this weird like I mean spoiler alert, we ended up with drones with tiny lasers attached to them flying through the field like zapping bugs would be kind of cool. um,
And of course it
Technically
would.
feasible maybe in the future, not so much now. But
That's
it's-
Josh Peot, Director
oh,
of Engineering here at Yahara Software. I'm Adam Steinert, Chief Technology Officer, and I was going to start off, Josh, by asking you a couple questions
sure.
about AI, because nobody's talking about that these days.
Nobody wants to talk about AI.
It's really
No, it's
frustrating.
not news. It's not. It's nowhere. I don't know.
Well, so I mean, right? Like we're constantly talking about this, right? And so is everybody else. And I thought it might be interesting to talk a little bit about like actually how we're using it internally, because that's actually not something that we really talk too much about in some of the other venues. But I think you've certainly been helping to lead that progression internally. You had a couple
Sure.
of you've run a couple experiments, but I guess in sort of the past, I'd say probably 12 months around there, kind of dabbling in there. I guess what's the biggest impact that you've seen on sort of like that, the tooling that's out there, but also how we've sort of found ways to implement that on the software dev side in effective ways.
Sure. Yeah. That's interesting. So like one, I would say like start with the caveat. Like I think we're in like stage one of maybe four or five of like what you could like roadmap like an AI adoption, at least in its current like form. Um, being essentially augmenting our people and our processes with AI tooling. There's still like it's not like we're like saying we're not vibe coding over here. We're not saying like go build this thing and just like seeing what drops out. I tried it once, didn't like it. It was really ineffective. It was more about troubleshooting than it was about actually creating something. Not saying it doesn't work for some things, but
Well,
not
yeah,
not
yeah, right. That's kind of a
technological. But
term
it
that's
seems,
sort of been like taken beyond its, I think, intended
yeah,
purpose. But
yeah. It's almost like a badge of honor for some things these days.
well, I mean, I
Yeah,
think one of the things, right, like as consultants, we have to do is right, like apply this stuff really responsibly, right?
right.
We're on the hook to get a job done. We know how to how to build software effectively, and so I think you and I are always looking at like how do we put the tools in place to make our lives easier, but also make sure that we're like doing the best, most efficient work that we can. And so that's kind of internally where I'd kind of mentioned some of the experiments that you've been trying with the devs here.
Yeah. It's like one that's been really interesting is I would call this like from like a process perspective. When we're working on projects, typically you have like a lead or like a lead dev, a tech lead, somebody who's more knowledgeable, more like known about like the industry and how to develop like architecting things, right? And then usually they're supported by people who are like kind of up and coming or have different skill sets or and they might have more junior developers. And in the past, we've it's like the code monkey style where it's do X, do Y, do Z, and then they go do X, do Y, do Z, and they come back to you for the next story or whatever. And on some projects that's okay. On most of our projects, though, we find that we need them to think a little more, to like analyze the situation a little more, have an opinion about things. But then that also causes at times, maybe the tech lead can't get to them right away to answer a question. They're going to go down a wrong rabbit hole. They're not quite getting that like immediate response support. And actually, that's where one of the things we found really effective with this like AI tooling is that all of a sudden they have what I would consider both the smartest and stupidest like lead dev looking over their shoulder because it's not coming up with ideas or directing them on how to think about things like, oh, this is your problem and here's what the business wants. But if they go, I don't know how to implement entity framework, it'll just be like, oh, here's how you do it. And here's something to think about while you're doing it. And like, oh, or they've got a bug and it's like, they can't quite figure out what's wrong with it. And they can highlight it and be like, okay, what's wrong with this? And it'll link them to like documentation and how to fix it. And like, so it's like really cool for like learning and unblocking from like a technological perspective. Um, and just kind of leaving the bigger questions then can go to like the tech lead or like more of the business oriented ones, but less the like, how do I do, I don't know, a self-referential loop in .NET? Not that I suggest doing those, but
Right.
so, yeah, but like that's on like kind of like the non-technical side, but really, really useful and just like unblocking people's ability to like work, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, do you think that's, I mean, as you've witnessed it, do you think that's really becoming an effective tool for growth? Because I think that's actually one thing that people are sort of like debating right now is like, AI coding assistant, gonna like actually help people, or does it sort of abstract things enough
Yeah.
that
So I think it's
you're not actually learning while you're doing, or like gaining the
yeah.
insights that you might, where you actually like kind of rolling through the thing. But you've actually kind of you've kind of described a scenario, a workflow that's very similar to what we would typically do with junior and senior developers working together. It's just that you've kind of added this.
Let the tool do some of it first. And that one's hard because like it's like AI is a really, really good learning tool. And like it kind of reminds me of like when dating myself, when the internet became a thing. Um, and you had a lot more people being like, well, Google's going to destroy our ability to think, or like Wikipedia, like, can't trust that. Um, and, but, done properly and like, start teaching people like, okay, you can use it as a reference, but you still got to think about it. You still like trust but verify, that sort of thing. And I honestly think that mindset just becomes more relevant when using like an AI tool because yeah, you can have it like you can give it a picture and say like build me this in whatever HTML and style it or whatever and make these things like when I click this it's going to do this and when I highlight this it's going to do that, and it'll do that. But if you don't like check the code, it could inject unsafe things into it. It could like I've seen some weird vibe codey things where like the private keys to your entire setup are just
Right.
in the HTML code, like, and you can just like copy those out, and all of a sudden your whole like Azure instance is, been hacked. Um, and like, so it's like there's still this. If you just let it do it, a lot of stupid things are gonna happen. But if you can ask it, look at it, kind of understand it, ask it a follow-up question. That's what it's really good at too. Is hey, you gave me this. Why did you do this instead of another option, or instead of this other thing I've heard about? And it'll give you that analysis of why I did it. Um, so I think it's more in how you interface with it than the tool itself being an issue, because it does let you cheat really easily.
Right.
So
Right.
like,
So it's almost
um,
the method of, can we put enough sort of guidelines or sort of roadmap for people of how to effectively
yeah,
use this.
like
And I mean, I think we're making some good progress there. Sometimes it's hard though with like there's so much like just discussion about just the highlights, right?
and it's this weird magic box right now. It just does things, and you're like, actually, one of the things kind of interesting is when, especially like we have talks with clients or different things, and they're like, well, I just want to be able to like talk to my data, or I want it just to do it for me, or like these things. And it's like, well, that is possible, yes, but it's not like ChatGPT or these generalized LLMs. Like you can't just slap an Olama model on it and be like, look, it knows what to do, because it doesn't. And yeah, it's that weird balance of like it's a really powerful tool, but you still have to kind of instruct it on what you want. Um, Lost my train of thought.
Was it still
Sorry.
more of a, well, I mean, it's interesting, right? Because you can't, but you also can a little bit, right? Like, I mean,
Yeah.
so you were messing around with that MCP and Postgres, right? On,
Oh yeah, yeah.
some potential data. And so you're like, well, you can't really tell it to talk to your data, but like, actually you did. It actually did come back with
That's
some
true. Yeah.
reasonable stuff. And that was
We,
actually
yeah.
pretty insightful for, um,
Yeah. And actually, that is true. So you give it the instruction of like, the MCP server, here's your database. Now go ask it a specific question, and it does it, right? Um, what's interesting around that though is each time you ask it that question in a new context, you could get a slightly different answer.
yeah.
Could, depending on the question you ask. But then again, that's also where we start looking at like it's not the LLM's fault, because the LLM's designed to do kind of like a big, broad, general thing. But now if you start getting to like these agentic ideas where it's like, oh, I have an agent, and this agent knows that it's trying to act like a biohealth technician, and it has access to a database of a bunch of like run records and whatever from like all their experiments and the different growth potentials of things and everything. And like okay, so now it knows what it's trying to do, how it should behave, what data it has access to, and generally what sort of answers it's trying to answer. And now when you ask it a question, it's going to be a lot more reliable on giving you kind of like what you expect out of it. Um,
Yeah, for sure. Well, and I wonder to like what level can we make that more deterministic? Could we get through okay, well, go through like a requirements phase, right? We want to do this. We want to get these results. Can we define the prompt and parameters enough that we could feel pretty reliable that, right, we get the correct answer back for it, or do we need to drop into tool calling or something else to get something more refined? But I think we
it
should.
also,
I'd like to do some experiments on that.
yeah,
With our internally we sort of, I think, dog food a little bit of
yeah,
if you
eat
use
our own tech.
the term to test some of the things out as we're learning on projects and then extending that. And yeah, I think this would be another good one to add to our list.
Actually, it's interesting because I was literally just having a conversation with one of our Megan, about like how good is good enough. Like, especially as engineers, we've traditionally thought about like how we build applications. We build all these like rules to automate. It's like, so we're trying, like, the core of it is to make somebody's life better, right? Like, you're trying to make something easier for them, or give them better access to data. Like, make their life easier in some way. And we've traditionally had to do that by being a little strict around like how we query stuff, how we format it, how we present it, and that like that it's always the same and it's always exactly right or whatever. It's
Mhm.
not like there's variance in what you're doing. But depending on what you're trying to do you need that? Or can you get like good enough, even if there's slight variance in the response, you're still getting the core of your answer and you're still making someone's life easier.
Right.
Like, so like, does it need to be fully 100% the same all the time? Maybe not. Depends what you're trying to do, right?
No,
Um,
absolutely, absolutely. Well, I think if you think about enterprise applications, things of that nature, where
yeah,
you are trying to solve some problems or answer some ad hoc queries, yeah, the good enough question is an interesting one. Of could we save, say, 80% of dev time by giving a fairly broad interface to a set of questions to get some of that
right.
data back, and then kind of make some of the refinements. People find out over time, oh yeah, that was interesting, that's useful, and I keep coming back to it. I don't want the ambiguity anymore, so let's take that, turn that into a hard requirement, and dev something out that is purpose
Okay.
built. But in a sense, that would be an interesting sort of path to follow. Then, well, we think this, so let's invest a bunch of money to develop out something that we find out that 2 months down the line we really didn't want
Right.
that.
Yeah,
Not that
it's
that ever
yeah.
happens.
No, never.
No,
No.
but
Actually, it's actually just thinking is like there's so many discovery meetings where we're talking to people about like their big ideas and what they want. It's like all these like huge ideas. And like, I want to give you all that, but that just costs time and effort in these things. And are you sure you really want it? Or, and like a lot of that I think I would say a number of those things can be solved with this like kind of good enough idea that then as their business grows or they refine the thought or start using it, they're like, oh, I didn't actually want that, or I want it this way instead, or like, and then it's like, oh yeah, now
yeah.
maybe let's put the refinement in or whatever. Because that's actually the thing I hate most about especially like startup engagements and stuff is having to be like, I don't have enough money for that. Like, I would love to build that.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's the microcosm of all software projects, right? Is distilling down the
Right.
right level of what we need and what we understand, and getting everybody together to get that in place. And obviously we're always trying to do it as efficiently as we can. So
Like yeah, and like actually to the efficiency, because I guess this started with like what we're doing internally, and we've pretty much enabled a lot. Well, we've enabled a lot of our developers, though, especially those most interested with like GitHub Copilot integrations, which for those who don't know, you can actually choose your model behind it too. So it's not just GitHub's. You could use Anthropic. You could use ChatGPT. Actually, I think GPT-4o is the current default model,
mhm.
um, but you could do I don't know. There's a list of them, and they're premium, but you can kind of like yeah. Anyway, so you can kind of choose your model, and it integrates in your like development setups. So all of a sudden, it's like there's little things that happen that you don't really notice until you notice, where it's like you're typing something and you call it like sign up or whatever, and then it gives you an autofill based on all the code and what it knows about your project. And it'll give you like 90% of the code you need to write a sign up function, just for like a tab. Or you can highlight things and be like, why isn't this working? Or why is this, why is my, what am I looking for? My editor's yelling at me because of this being badly formatted or whatever.
Right.
Or even just, I'd say like rote, repeatable, like CRUD operations, literally CRUD, like you create, update, all that stuff. Um, all those things, like AI is really good at just making, and that's like hundreds of lines of code that you need in order to perform the operation. But like, do you really want to write it every time? Like, how many times do you need to write a CRUD operation before you're sick of it, right? Um,
About
and
10 years ago.
that's
Yeah.
about right. It's like, why can't I just do this once and have it just work? Um,
Well,
and so we're getting
so
a lot of there though, right? So
Yeah, I guess. Well, and so let maybe like talk a little bit about the converse to that, right? And
yeah,
sort of like the ecosystem or the environment now. Where everybody's everybody's talking about how cool it is. What about the detractors? Where's the pushback coming from? Right? I mean, not everything is smooth, and I know that not
yeah,
everybody is super into it, and I think that's fine. I think everybody, I think collectively as is a software engineering ecosystem, we're trying to find the right places. What's the where's the friction?
yeah. Honestly, I think some of it is just straight fear of change, totally understandable, like human condition. Some of it is, well, I tried it once 6 months ago and it wasn't very good. So, and for those who don't know, this industry is moving incredibly fast. Things we've talked about like 6 months, 8 months ago as being heavy lifts are like, oh, this is an easy little like weekend hack, or it'll stay 2 hour thing. And it would have been like 2 weeks of dev effort 6 months ago, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So there's like some of those. But I think that everyone has their own style, right? Like even the people who are pro using it, they all engage with the tooling in a different way, which is really interesting. Like kind of making it work for their own workflow. Um, but I'd say some of the bigger ones are like, well, I can do this better, or it gives me, like I get like a common thing I hear is like I feel like I'm fighting the solution more than if I just did it myself.
Mm-hmm.
And part of that I think is learning to engage with the tool so it gives you what you want, and not just giving it a broad question or something. But I think part of it is just understanding when the tool is just not really good at what you're trying to get it to do either.
Yeah.
Um, and so, but like, so there's that kind of, and then I guess a big one too. So besides the like, doesn't do what I want, or it's I don't know how to work it in my process, or like those kind of speed bumps of engaging with like coding differently. There's also a level of, if you're really good as a developer and you already kind of have your tooling that works, there is actually a drastic slowdown adding a new tool to the mix. Like if you already have a
Oh yeah.
generator that's
Yeah.
going to give like classes from a database or whatever, and like, cool,
It's like changing your keyboard. It really
right,
messes
like
you up for a little bit.
let's just switch to Dvorak and like,
I'm not even talking about that. I'm just talking about like
pushing
going
that
from
way.
like one model to the next.
I'd be on that too. Yeah,
I can't go from my
the control
laptop
key is
to
just not in
my
the right spot.
desktop easily. Um,
Well, yeah, and there's also like a little bit of that too, where it's there a little bit of the craft goes away to a sense where thing the difference between like what it generates and what someone who's really good as a practice engineer, maybe it's like slightly more thread efficient and like it's kind of got its own beauty to it. Like, but that kind of goes away a little bit when you think like, well, that did it in 5 seconds where it would have taken me 5 minutes, but it's like it's not as pretty, and like kind of get a little different, like
that's
the craft is going away, or there's like the artistry behind it. So
yeah,
um,
maybe. I mean, I think. Well, I don't think that's maybe uncommon from
right.
from the way the industry changes. I don't know. Like I've used it in sort of like the macro sense. Like like last week we were talking. I was building an MCP server just to like test it out, see how this goes, right? And I let it generate. I actually used Anthropic's guys like here like generate out like
Yep.
from scratch, and I was like, oh, this is awful. Like I don't know where anything is. Like I ended up having to change a few things. But I also like discovered a little bit of that tension of like adapting some of my own code and style into like
Yeah.
that framework and not, and it was a little bit of a blend, similar to what
Yeah.
you're saying. Like, okay, well, this I like, this I don't like. This structure, I want to change. But on the other hand, it still saved a bunch of time. Right, I didn't have to come up with the whole like Python project and everything from scratch, and
Right.
so And actually, after a while, it was kind of fun to go through and refactor that a little bit, and actually pretty educational to go through and actually
Oh, yeah, sure.
learn like how it all fits together. It was an interesting experience, one that I think everybody should like, well, right, try it out, like we were talking with uh, Patrick the other day, right? Another engineer here, just like learning through
Oh
like
yeah,
going through the process of doing this and understanding some of the tools more and how they operate.
right. Like
Um,
just because you can ping an API, it's like, well, downloading the local model, setting it up, like communicating with it differently, like just seeing how that all works. It is valuable because it teaches you kind of the limitations. Like I said earlier, it's like there's this view that AI is this magic box that just does everything for you. It's like yes, and not really, but sort of. Like really depends on what you're trying to do, and like if you don't really understand its limitations, it's going to be less effective for you, right?
right.
But I actually think you had a really good point there a second ago about kind of like how you interacted with the tool. And I think that's a lot of where I spend my mental thought, as especially as these tools are adapting and engaging. Agentic is this newer thing, that's and creating these teams of agents and stuff. It's like, well, how does the human interact? What's the human element in all of this? Because if you expect it to work in like by itself, it's just going to fail. But if you start to treat it like a team of helpers and you're like directing them, it's like, okay, all of a sudden this is getting a lot better and like things are working the way you're like, even if you're just like what you were doing with your experiment, it's like, okay, here, do this thing for me. And then you're kind of coming in like, well, I kind of actually want it more like this way. I'm gonna organize it differently, or like, this doesn't quite do what I want it to do, and like refactoring and um, it's like just how you like what that human and like technological interaction is. Um, and I don't think there's a like size shop. I think there'll be like paradigms of how people will kind of do things,
Yeah.
but I think everyone's going to engage a little bit differently just with what works best for them. And I think that's the important part too, right? Like every off-the-shelf solution we kind of see that we've, from like a computing standpoint, eventually what you want to do, it's not going to let you do, and then it becomes a headache. So if you have like a one-size-fits-all solution for an LLM, it's not going to actually fit everybody. Um, so yeah.
So what's out there that you haven't dug into yet that you want to? What's next on your list?
Oh boy. I think some of the biggest ones are like, what of my like life and work tasks can I actually build an agent for? Um, because with the advent of MCP, Model Context Protocol, and kind of letting LLMs engage with that, you can give it better direction on how to do things. So you can like essentially like you can create a tool or an agent to handle things, and you can make like you said you had it kind of generate the MCP server for you to start. So it's like, well, I want to. I don't know, what's a good example? I don't know, let's go nerd. Steam sales coming
We
out.
aren't there yet.
What's that?
I said we aren't there yet.
I suppose, yeah. Like, there's a Steam sale of video games going on, and I've got a whole list of my like wish list, or I can build an agent now, or that's gonna interface with that, and I can have like ask the LM, be like, okay, keep an eye on this, and when it drops below a certain price, like add it to my library or something, and
Okay.
like I could just forget about it,
So
right?
you don't have
Or
enough in your Steam librry yet. You need to
uh, I
robotically add more.
say that. Well, like or emails, right? Actually, this is an interesting one I came across where I was thinking about this process of like when you're trying to set up a meeting with somebody, whether it's personal or business or whatever, and there's
Yeah.
that back and forth of like, what's your availability? This works for me. This doesn't work for me. If you just like enabled it to have access to your schedule and said, email Adam and set up a meeting for some time later this week, targeting like Wednesday afternoon if possible. Um, send an email confirming that that time works because I don't, have access directly to your schedule. Um, and then, basically work out a time that works for both of us and then add it to our schedules. And it would like put a hold on your calendar for something that works for you, email you to see if that time works for you. If it doesn't, maybe it would follow up asking, what times do work. It'll check that against your schedule, confirm the thing, and then just add it to your calendar, send out the invite, and and it's done. And my engagement in that process was 15 seconds, and then it's doing all the back and forth, all the communication, all the, like that's so cool. That would be huge time saver. Like,
I agree.
yeah, yeah. And just like, what can I automate out of my life? Like, how about you? Do you have like like this would be great if I could do like what's the next thing to engage with there?
Well, so I've mentioned Guppy, but like I
Yeah.
still have my dream for like my little like virtual assistant. I'm getting closer, right?
All right.
I think I need to plug the things. That was the MCP server, right? So that was
Sure.
partially so. Like my nerdy thing is the marine aquarium at home and automating that whole process. And so the MCP server I was writing for that was talking to the aquarium controller, so I could control the lighting, the get information on the tank parameters and things like that.
Little robot that cleans the glass for you too, or
I, I could use that. I mean that's sort of like my toy example for that, but no, I mean I do, I want like the assistant, like the voice assistant always running, and so in the background, and then creating a couple of these tools. So this kind of started. I call it I'm like kit bashing a virtual assistant, because I'm just like I'm picking like open source projects out there that do
sure. Yeah.
that do this. And there was one, I can't think of the name of it off the top of my head, but basically it was like the premise was creating like a GLaDOS type virtual assistant.
Sure,
So
sure.
they've got the Nonix model for the voice, and what was particularly interesting about this one, and I'll have to go back and sort out the repo, but they had a really good like audio loop that was listening for the wake word and kicking out prompts. It had been just basically straight to like to OpenAI, which is cool, but like I actually want like some of like the local integrations, right? I want to just be able to tell it like go do this thing, or like what's the what are the current tank parameters, or go like record, or do a transcript of the last meeting that I was on and summarize it, and then like throw it into Obsidian for me.
That'd be so
So
nice.
what I was kind of what recently I was going through that loop of like, okay, well, how do I sort of like parse the commands? How do I do like categorize the commands that it's fielding, and then decide like, what tool calling to use, or should I use that? And so I was doing straight tool calling with like local Olama. And
Okay.
then I was like, oh, well, let's see if we can't plug in like some MCP server stuff. And so then I've been down this whole rabbit hole of like, okay, what's the best local model for this? How do the MCP servers really respond to this? And now it's kind of I'm kind of back to that sort of routing thing of doing some experiments to figure out, because one of the things is like I want this to be fast, right? So if you're running like Claude desktop locally and plugging into local MCP servers, like it's kind of hokey. I mean, it's doing a lot of like the thinking and the back and forth.
Yeah.
And I want this thing to be fast. So I'm just trying to think, go through some experimentation on, okay, what's the best way to like take the text input, run it through here, fire it off to the appropriate LLM, and then get the answer back in like audio, right? Like I want to get like I want to be talking to the computer. I don't want to just like type. I do, right? So that's next. So I'm plugging away at that. I think I got a few more weeks, and then it'll kind of manifest itself into something a little bit more.
And that's what I was actually thinking about, because I mean, I've had old school show. Okay, was the science one where like the podunk town sheriff goes to like Scienceville and they get a smart house, and I've always wanted like to like engage and live in like that kind of thing. And so when like things like Alexa came out, don't listen. Um, she spun her leg up.
It's like, oh yeah, you want to talk to me?
Um, what? But like I was like, oh, this is gonna be great. You can start to do these things. But just because of how general they had to make it for their demand or their needs and stuff, like it just never seems to work right. Or like I can't get it to work with specific things, or it's like it's all in their own ecosystem, or you've got all these smart technologies that are smart, heavy emphasis on the quotes. And it's like, oh yeah, this would be great if you would actually work or like could talk to each other or all these things. And so what you're like doing now is like, yeah, that's interesting. Like just making your own assistant that works and behaves how you would actually want it to, um,
Well,
and like automate a bunch.
yeah, I mean, I really believe that there's enough tooling out there, right? You can like
Yeah,
pull this together. I'm like using Fabric AI, to do some like the chat transcript stuff that we've talked. I mean, it's
yeah,
just got like the flows in it, so it's easy to like sort of like plug these things together, Bash script
yeah,
here,
right.
some Python there, and make it work. But
Especially if you like, and I'm even thinking if it doesn't quite like from a speed perspective, if it has to keep, say, like requerying, like you don't have the longevity of the memory or whatever. It's like that's where you throw an agent on top of it. Be like, oh well, this is my fish tank agent. You're like, and it's
right,
really good at dealing with that stuff. So then when you ask the question, like your LLM's like, oh, I have a friend that's really good at that. Like, and just
right.
like it knows how to interact and like does its thing. Um, and now I want to make a smart house.
Well, you should. Next
Why
time we
not?
do this, we can report back and see where
There you go.
we've
Yeah.
gotten. Um, so we've
And
been
I do
we've been
think,
rolling for a little bit here. I um, I wanted to ask you one more. We should probably wrap maybe in like 10 minutes or so, but
yeah.
I wanted to ask you about your so you got some AR goggles a little while ago.
Oh
We
yeah.
haven't I haven't checked in with you on that. Like
Actually, not sitting on my desk right now where I'd throw them on.
they're pretty stylish.
Yes. Yeah, it would be. And they're pretty awesome. I mean, they're straight out like the '90s, like the big old eye coverage. Yeah, I think the experiment's going really like as a straight like productivity or like enjoyment tool. Like I plug it in my phone and like it's like a huge screen in front of me. I can put it somewhere in the room and like putz around and then like look back at it or whatever. Or with my computer, when I travel to the office and I don't want to deal with like the whole setup at a look like a desk or something, I can just like plug those in and I have a huge widescreen monitor I can just like engage with. Um, that part of it's really cool. And with the specific ones I got, they actually don't have an external camera yet. That actually launches this year, where you can have like you can attach a camera to the bridge, and then you can start getting a little more of like that, like some of the other experience I want to run of like, okay, if you detect something in your visual range, like a barcode, like it reads it, or like a QR code, and
Right.
like you can get like a little boop with like additional information. Can't do it with the current goggles I have, unfortunately, yet.
So which ones did you get?
I have the XR Real ones, which are they do the 3 degrees of motion tracking, so basically head
Hmm.
like range. Um, I think that as I push this experiment, I'll probably want to get the newer version of those, um, because they have 6 degree tracking with their little like additional device. So like my goal like would be to have this thing that I could throw on, and it's got a little bit of a camera and whatever, and it's like picking up what's going on around, and you could set up like kind of set pieces where it's like as I look at things like additional information's popping or
Right. And I guess that's
uh,
what I suppose without the camera, then it's not really doing
yeah,
any anchoring on that stuff, or be able to do
yeah, which
overlays.
and I think that's where the AR or yeah, the augmented tech is a little behind like the virtual tech because like most virtual goggles by need of how they interface, how they track, like they've got little external cameras, right? Um, but one thing I do like about it is they're definitely more comfortable on like the mental strain. Like when you're in VR for a long time, it's a lot more like mentally wearing because I don't think our brains are it's like there's extra processing going on, like trying to understand. But with the AR, it's like most of what you're seeing is reality, and then there's just like a little bit of extra overlay that goes on top of it. And that's been really interesting. Like I think I wore them for like 4 hours straight one day, just doing work, and like it's kind of interesting because like instead of being here and my shoulders getting locked up or whatever, it's like I could just unlock the chair and do this, and then like I've got like a screen still here and I'm typing or whatever, and it's
have you done any like programming with them or using it
yeah, I
like
have, yeah,
how's
as
that work?
like it's actually been really interesting. The it was good. Like it was a lot more comfortable than I thought it would be. Because there is that it's not a shimmer, but there's that little bit of like I'm not, you know, a 4K monitor sort of fidelity.
Hmm.
Um, and then, I had to say, especially if you're like coding, like locking it in your field of view, so as your head moves, the
Hmm.
screen doesn't move like you're used to. Like that makes it a lot better. Because otherwise, if it's following, there's like it's a delay, but it's not like huge. It's like just enough that you perceive it, kind of thing.
Gotcha.
Which kind of breaks you out of whatever you're doing. Yeah, like I think it's definitely a future direction. I think the technology is still trying to catch up a little bit to what I would want to do with it. Um, but then again,
Yeah.
I'm also, I've got like a mid-range pair, right? I didn't drop $2,000 on a
Yeah.
experiment. So,
I mean, it seems like
um,
it's getting closer. Like, I mean,
oh,
obviously,
100%.
we've talked a bunch of potential applications, like in
Well,
biohealth.
they're,
But I mean, I think we're like, I don't know. It feels like it's like 6 to 12 months where you can really start doing some cool stuff.
and I think what's been interesting to see is that one, a lot of people are producing these things, and there's like niche markets going on, like the pair you were talking about that could actually do some minor like lens corrections, so you didn't have to wear your
Hmm.
glasses or contacts under. Like that's one brand that's doing
Yeah.
that, so it's like a little niche. So there's enough generalization in the market where they can start to do that, which is cool. And then they're starting to make it modular, like with the real ones or the XR ones, or yeah, the XR, yeah. The camera isn't a whole new device. It's like attaches to the bridge of the actual like any of the glasses that they have, and like adds that ability to
Oh,
like the
that's kind of cool.
existing.
So it's modular. You
Yeah.
can kind of.
Yeah. And I was like, so you can start to do these things like, do I need a camera? Do I not need a camera? Do I need the 6 degree of field, like, or is three fine? Like, you can
Right.
start to like use similar technology and setups, but just kind of add the parts you need. And, so that was cool. Like, and that's where, to me, that's where it starts getting more to like commercial use is like, you know, but
Right.
plus I
Yeah.
just want to nerd out and use it. So,
We'll have to keep tabs on where you get with that. But
yeah, I have to steal your digital lab setup at some point and just try it. See if I can load it up
oh
onto
yeah,
the.
load it in there. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, that'd be kind of cool. So
I have no idea how that would play, or if I could like at least get one of the models placed in a room, so it's like just sitting over in the middle of my living room or something.
yeah,
But
kind of walk around. Yeah, yeah. Just let me
yeah,
know. I'll fire off some assets your way. But well, I think it's out in the repo. So
yeah,
um,
I have
I
to
don't
change
know.
a little bit of it.
It's I think probably we can wrap there today. Um, for those that stuck around with us, thanks for joining us. I think we'll do this. I think we'll do this again sometime soon. I think we want to keep kind of talking tech and topics. I think we should talk some process stuff too. I mean,
Yeah,
there's saber rattling going on in the dev crowds about agile and things of that nature. We should talk
yeah,
process and tech,
yeah.
but
We'll just do one on the history of Agile and how it's changed. And
I don't know. We'll have to get some.
I'm sure there's a YouTube video about that already, so it's
I'm sure there.
yeah.
But yeah, we'll come back in a few weeks and do this again. Maybe we can get somebody else from the crew in to talk with us. But thanks for hanging out. Talk to you in a bit.
It's good. See you later.
That's it.